وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The month of Ramadan al-Kareem, it has a connection with Sayyiduna Umar radiallahu ta'ala. From the perspective that हम जो रोज़ा रखते हैं तो जो पहली उम्मतें थी वो जो रोज़ा रखा करते थे, their fasting was different than our fasting. और जब शुरू में सहाबा किराम पर रोज़ा फ़र्ज़ हुआ तो वो जो रोज़ा रखा करते थे, the fasting which they kept was more similar, or it was the fasting of the previous nations. यानी उसका क्या माना? The way that they would fast is they would fast 2 times in the day. सुबह सादिक से लेकर मगरिब तक वो पहला रोज़ा हुआ करता था. They would fast from dawn till sunset. And then from Maghrib till Isha namaz, they could eat, they could drink, so on and so forth. And then from Isha namaz until morning, they would keep their second fast. And so every day it'd be like this. They'd keep almost a 24-hour fast. And it was strict to that extent कि अगर Maghrib के बाद वो सो गए और Isha से पहले वो उठ गए, फिर भी as soon as they woke up, जैसे ही वो बेदार हुए, they were not allowed to eat, they were not allowed to drink, so on and so forth. So this was the type of fasting which was initially. One day Sayyiduna Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu masjid में आए, अर्ज़ किया, या रसूलल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, I have been destroyed, हलाक हो गया. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ने फरमाया, क्या हुआ, what happened? And he said that, Ya Rasulullah, in the night I went to my wife. So after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed verses of the Quran Kareem in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made clear, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ, that it is permissible for you to go in the night to your wives. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always going to make this type of fasting farz upon us. हमारे ऊपर ऐसा ही रोज़ा farz होने वाला था. लेकिन जो सबब बना, the person who became one of the means by which the fasting was reduced so that it was only from dawn till sunset, was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And so he has a link with the month of Ramadan in this aspect, that this mercy and this ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it came through him. Now after this, we mentioned that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he migrated to Madinatul Munawwara, and it's important to note that he was always, like Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, always by the side of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. हमेशा Rasulullah sallallahu के साथ, हर जंग में, जब भी Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam jihad के लिए जाया करते थे, from the battle of Badr until the battle of Tabuk, every time by the side of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the battle of Uhud, when people they fled from the battle, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was one of those individuals who stayed firm. It was in the battle of Uhud that the daughter of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Sayyidah Hafsa, her husband Khunais ibn Hudhafa, he was injured. And from his injuries he would pass away. Sayyidah Hafsa would become a widow. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he would ask, he would say, Ya Rasulullah, I wish that Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala and he would marry my daughter. Because Sayyidina Uthman was married to Sayyidah Ruqayya radiallahu ta'ala anha, the daughter of Rasulullah, but she passed away after the battle of Badr. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked, Ya Umar, what if I said something better than this? What if I gave my daughter, Sayyidah Kulthum, in the nikah of Sayyidina Uthman, and I took your daughter Hafsa in my nikah? And as you can imagine, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he came for something which was good, and here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving him something which was unimaginably better. And so Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he was over the moon, he was really happy. And in this way, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and his daughter Sayyidah Hafsa would become married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. she would become from the Azwaj Mutahharat and Ummahatul Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers. And in terms of relationship now, Sayyidina Umar, he becomes what we would say in our language, the father-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this deep connection. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he had so much love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So much love for Rasulullah. That's why when Rasulullah mentioned that hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. None of you is a true believer until I am more beloved to him than his father, than his parents, than his children, and the entirety of mankind. Now, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was a person who was very firm upon the truth. He was very hard upon the truth. And they say this is one of the reasons why he was given the title Abu Hafs, which Hafs literally means lion. Some people, they think that it was because of his daughter Hafsa, but no, Rasulullah gave Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and this laqab of Abu Hafs, the father of the lion, because of his firmness in the deen, on the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was very, very firm upon the truth. So when Rasulullah mentioned this, he says, Ya Rasulullah, I can say that you are more beloved to me than my parents. I can say that you are more beloved to me than my children. I can say you are more beloved to me than my wealth and the entirety of mankind. But Ya Rasulullah, I can't say that you are more beloved to me than myself. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he mentioned that this is not kamil iman. This is not complete iman. Until I am more beloved to you. Yani the love which you have controlled. There's some love which is fitri, is natural. You can't control that. But there's some love which you have control over. And when it comes to that, the person that has to be most beloved to you, for you to have the top level of iman, it has to be Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so the narration goes that he went away, he thought over it, he came back. Rasulullah places his hand upon his chest, and then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and says, yes, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, now you are more beloved to me than my parents, than my children, than the entirety of mankind. You are more beloved to me even than my own self. This is how much I love Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he had for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so this is when they go into Hudaybiyah, when they're going to perform Umrah, and the kuffar, they stop them. Usually in the battles, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would send an ambassador, someone to represent the Muslims, he would send Umar, because he had a very loud voice. But in Hudaybiyah, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have many enemies in Makkatul Mukarramah. I fought with many of them. When I accepted Islam, because of my conduct with them, many of them, they hate me. And after he accepted Islam, he was an open enemy to the disbelievers, because they had hatred towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we read the narration of what he said, when he said, are we not upon truth? Are you not the messenger of Allah? All of this was of his support of Islam and his love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what happened, we mentioned. And thereafter, we learn that after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he leaves from this world, the incident which transpired, how Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he was going to kill people just because they were saying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away. This was, again, all of this was a manifestation of the love he had for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had such a close relationship, such a close link with him, that when he left from this world, he couldn't even imagine. It was so difficult for him to be separated from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every moment of his day, all of his time spending in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had mentioned in numerous narrations about how after him the Khalifa would be Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But at the same time, he had hinted and he had indicated towards the fact that after Sayyidina Abu Bakr, it would be Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And for this reason, in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he kept Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu very close to him. They were always together. It was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu when Mughira bin Shu'bah came, and he said that the Ansar, they're looking to select a leader he went to Sayyidina Umar to resolve the matter. Sayyidina Umar goes to Abu Bakr, and then they both go. Is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an the first one to give his hands in the hands of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. Not only this, when the army of Usama bin Zayd would go to fight the Romans, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he would request Usama. He's the Khalifa of the believers at this time, but he would request Usama bin Zayd that, will you give me permission to keep Umar behind? Can you imagine this? He's the highest ranking individual, but he says, will you give me permission to keep Umar behind, because I want to keep him as an advisor. And so during this 2 years and 3 months, Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, again, he's getting training. He's been trained by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and now he's being trained by Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. He appoints him as a judge. And then when the issue comes, when the Hufaz are martyred in the battle of Yamama, jab Hufaz shaheed hote hai, to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he says to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, कि अगर हमने Quran एक मुसहफ में नहीं लिखा, if we did not gather it into one place, then this Quran will be lost. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he says, I will not do what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do. मैं कोई भी ऐसा फेल, कोई अमल नहीं करूँगा जो Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ने नहीं किया. Sayyidina Umar, he kept insisting, he kept persisting, kept saying, until Sayyidina Abu Bakr says that my heart was opened, my chest was expanded. I realized this was the right thing to do. And so this is when Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he sets out on the mission to gather the Quran in one mushaf, an official copy of the Quran. They called Sayyidina Zayd bin Thabit, the young man of the Ansar, who said that when they asked, he said the same thing, how can we do what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do? But they said, it's a good action, it must be done. Eventually Zayd bin Thabit, he is convinced. He spends close to a year, sat outside Masjid Nabwi, collecting the Quran-i-Kareem. And when he completes the task, he says, if they had asked me, because of the severity and the importance, uski jo ahmiyat hai, he says, if they had asked me to take a mountain and move it to another place, this would have been easier than what they had asked from me. But bihamdihi ta'ala, the Quran is gathered into one place, each surah written on a separate page. Today the Quran-i-Kareem that we read, the one who was responsible for this, it was Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, but the one who told him to do it was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. So every person who reads the Quran, this sawab goes into the scroll, into the sahifa of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And this was the person, his foresight, he could see the need and the importance of the various requirements from the ummah. And for this reason, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not in one place, in numerous places, he said, for example, in one hadith, I went through various books of hadith and found where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions the fazila and the excellence of Abu Bakr and Umar. In one place, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, it is not fitting for a people among whom Abu Bakr and Umar is, that somebody else should be the imam. In one narration he mentions that I have 2 ministers, 2 wazir in the heavens and 2 wazir on the earth. My 2 ministers in the heavens are Sayyidina Jibreel and Sayyidina Mikael, and the 2 on the earth are Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says in regards to them, they are my hearing and my sight. Literally, they are my eyes and my ears. And Rasulullah instructed the companions, follow those who come after me, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. In one narration, it mentions, in Bukhari Sharif, the companions, they say that we used to choose amongst the companions. In the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we used to choose amongst the companions. We used to say that the most excellent after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Abu Bakr, and after this is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. And in the narration of Tabarani, it mentions that Rasulullah heard this, and Rasulullah did not reject any of this. The fact that Rasulullah is not rejecting it is an evidence towards the fact that this is correct. Once Rasulullah, he comes into the masjid. In his right hand is the left arm of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. In his right hand is the left arm of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. In his left hand is the right arm of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And like this, Rasulullah comes into the masjid and he says that it is in this exact same manner that we will be raised on the Day of Judgment. Meaning on the day of judgment, when I come out of my grave, in my right hand will be Abu Bakr, in my left hand will be Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. And like this, there's so many narrations. In one narration, he says that if these two, agar ye do ek baat par maan gaye, if they agreed upon something, wo muttafiq ho gaye, he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, I would not reject them. And finally, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, he said, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an would say that the best of this ummah after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Imam Zahabi says this is mutawatir, mass transmitted from Sayyidina Ali. To that extent that in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Ali, if somebody said that Sayyidina Ali was better than Abu Bakr and Umar, he would give them the had punishment. He would lash them for making false accusation. So then it is no surprise, in the final moments of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, when he was in his final illness, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he began to call the companions one by one. Sayyidina Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Sayyidina Usayd bin Hudayr, Sayyidina Sa'id bin Zayd, Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan, and he would ask them one by one, what do you think about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala? They would say, oh Abu Bakr, you're asking us, he's your best friend, you know better. But Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq says, no, even then I want to know what your opinion is. And they, each of them, they had such beautiful things to say about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. I'm only going to mention what Sayyidina Uthman said. Because what he said, if someone gives a compliment like this, maybe there is a few people in the entirety of existence after the prophets who would be worthy of this compliment. And that is, that Sayyidina Uthman said, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about Umar is better than what the people know about Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Meaning, what his private life is better than his apparent life. If we knew what he was like behind closed doors, we would love him even more than we love him right now. There are very few individuals who are better behind closed doors than they are in front of people. It's easy to be good in front of people. It's easy to be pious in front of people. It's easy to stand in namaz in front of people, to be respectful, and to do all of these types of things. But then when you go behind closed doors and it's just you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you become a completely different person. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he agreed with this. He said that Umar behind closed doors, he was better than he was in front of the people. When he heard these words, Abu Bakr Siddiq, he said, I am going to elect Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala as the next Khalifa. He had Sayyidina Uthman write it down. It was signed, it was stamped. It was mentioned to all of the people. When Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala heard, he said, oh Abu Bakr, we will only accept one person. It has to be Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, yes, that's the person who I have selected. He says, in that case, we are happy. अब जो शिया है वो एतराज़ करते हैं, कहते हैं कि रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने किसी को मखसूस नहीं किया, लेकिन सैयदना अबू बकर सिद्दीक ने मखसूस किया. That he sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't choose one specific person, not apparently, not openly. He gave ishara towards him, he indicated towards him. But he never said that this will definitely be. Why did Sayyidina Abu Bakr select Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala? To hum kaise jawab de? So the answer is, fair enough, you say that Sayyidina Abu Bakr selected Sayyidina Umar, but aap log khud kehte hain ki Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ne Sayyidina Ali ko chuna. That Rasulullah himself selected Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. So where's your objection there? So this is the first thing. And the second thing is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did select Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq in numerous narrations. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr didn't select Sayyidina Umar out of just his own opinion. He took all of the opinion of the companions and he said, this is my person whom I believe is the most worthy. When the people, they gave bay'ah on the hands of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, then they showed through their actions that they believed that Sayyidina Umar was the most worthy person to become the Khalifa. So when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an, he leaves from this world, the people, they give their hands and they pledge allegiance to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, and he becomes the next Khalifa. Once he becomes the leader of the Muslims, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he ascends the minbar and he gives a lengthy khutbah, a lengthy lecture. But he makes a beautiful dua during this lecture. What does he say? Look at the words and look at the humility. He says, Allahumma inni da'ifun faqawwini. Eh Allah, mein kamzor hu, mujhko taqat ata farma. I am weak, give me strength. And he was one of the strongest people of the Quraysh But he says, oh Allah, I am weak. Give me strength, because strength is through you, Ya Allah. وَإِنِّي شَدِيد فَلَيِّنِي. That I am harsh, I am hard, so make me soft. Because this was one of the objections that people raised to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, that if you elect Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he's got a very harsh nature. But Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq says, if I have to stand in front of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks me, why did you elect somebody who had a harsh temperament? Then if Allah gives me the ability to answer, then I will answer. Main jawab dunga कि लोगों में सबसे जो बेहतर आदमी था, the person who was the best individual from all of the people, that is the person whom I selected, Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, Allahumma inni da'ifun faqawwini, wa inni shadidun falayyini, and he says, wa inni bakhilun fasakhini, that I am miserly, so Allah make me generous. After this, says Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he writes letters to the governors in the various areas, and what he writes to the people is very interesting. But before that, when he was stood on the mimbar, what happened? When Rasulullah would stand on the mimbar, he would stand on the topmost step. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he would say, I am not equal to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so he would stand on the second step. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he would say, I am not equal to the beloved Rasul, I am not equal to Abu Bakr. So he would not stand on the top step, he would not stand on the second step, he would stand on the lowest step, out of respect for the two who came before him. He writes a letter to the governors in the various provinces, and this is something which is so important. He writes and he says, he's writing his first letter to the governors. What would he write? What could he command them to do? What would he instruct them to do? Listen what he says. He says, your most important, urgent matter in my view is what? Is namaz. The first thing he instructs the governors about, out of anything he could say, make sure you collect the zakat, make sure you collect the jizya, make sure you send it, the khums to Madinatul Munawwara, make sure you return the wealth of the Baytul Mal, all of these things. But no, the first thing he mentions, he says, is the prayer. He says, whoever guards it well and persistently has guarded his religion, and whoever is careless is even more careless with everything else. कि अगर नमाज की हिफाजत की तो सब की हिफाजत की. A person who is strict upon namaz, he will be careful with everything else. लेकिन जो नमाज में सुस्ती करता है, आप देखते हैं कि जो बंदा नमाज में सुस्ती करता है, then other things he doesn't care about. He has no consideration about those things. He also wrote to the governors, and he mentioned a few things. Number one, he says, none of you are allowed to ride a specific type of horse. It was a non-Arab horse, Perdahun, it's called something like this. It was a large non-Arabic horse. He says, you're not allowed to ride this. Nowadays, our MPs and our leaders, they get driven around, chauffeured around in these fancy cars. Yeah, they take private jets from this place to the other place. Number two, they're not allowed to wear fancy clothes. These expensive designer clothing. The governors, the leaders, they're not allowed to wear this. Number three, they're not allowed to eat delicacies. These fancy food like caviar and this and that. And number four, he said that none of you should post a guard at your door. You're not allowed to have no bodyguards. Because if a person has a complaint, they should be able to knock on the door and they should be able to speak to you straight away. This is what he commanded, and he was very strict upon this. Sometimes when the governors would send gifts to his family, not to even him, if they sent it to him, he would punish them straight away. He would have them lashed for sending gifts because he would consider it as a bribe. But even if they sent it to his family members, like once Sayyidina Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he sent a fancy piece of carpet to one of his wives. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he got so angry. He goes, don't you dare send any gifts to my family. Because this is like trying to take favor with the one who's in charge. So in this manner, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he was a man of extreme justice. And there's numerous narrations which are mentioned, which we can talk about, and inshallah in the coming days we will talk about. One of the things which he mentioned, which is linked to what I want to discuss, is when he wrote to the governors, one of the things he mentioned in those letters was that make sure you keep the streets clean. Today if you go into the Muslim areas, you will find that the streets are the dirtiest in the Muslim areas. which is a sad reality, because if you look at the Khalifahs, this is something that they emphasized, cleanliness. To that extent that once Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, when he visited one of the provinces, it was probably Damascus, he saw a person who was begging on the street. He asked him, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm from Ahlul Dhimma, yani Ahl Kitab. We pay jizya." He says, "Why are you begging?" He says, "The jizya has become very difficult for us." The jizya was a tax that the non-Muslims would pay. It was similar to the zakat. But in the time of Sayyidina Umar, the jizya was less than the zakat. They would pay this money, and as an exchange for this money, they would be protected by the army. They would rule by their own laws, and they were free to live in the Muslim empire without any difficulty. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he sees this blind beggar, he says to Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, "We are not going to take from them in their youth when they're healthy, and then forget them when they're old and they're weak." So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he had a pension fixed for the elderly non-Muslims who used to pay jizya. So that way they would never have to beg on the streets. You know, when we see like the welfare system in the Western countries, you know, we get shocked. But in reality, those individuals who initiated this practice were the likes of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. So he fixed for the non-Muslims a pension system that when they would give jizya whilst they were alive, whilst they were young and they were healthy, and then in their old age they would be given back from that, so that that way they would not be left to beg on the streets. In a similar way, one day Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he was walking on the streets and he heard a child who was crying. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he goes to the woman, and the child is very young, so he says, "Feed the child." And so the mother, she kind of ignores it, and he walks away. The child is still crying. He's repeating, "Why are you not feeding the child?" And then the mother, she says, "The reason why I'm not feeding the child is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, the Amir, the Khalifa of the believers, he has fixed, you know, the welfare system. What is given to the children who have been weaned of milk. यानी जब वो अब दूध नहीं पीते हैं तब जाके उनको पैसे मिलते हैं, और अगर अभी वो दूध पी रहे हैं तो उनको पैसे नहीं मिलते हैं. So for this reason I am trying to wean this child off the milk, so that way I can get the stipend, I can get the money from the Baytul Mal, because I am in need of it." When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he heard about this, because he had fixed, you know, for every single person they would be given money in the Khilafah. When he heard about this, he was shocked, he was so upset. They say he went away, and in Fajr namaz he was so upset, he was crying so much. As a consequence of this, they couldn't even understand which surahs he recited. They asked him after what has happened, he explained the situation. And after this, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and for every single person in the Khilafah, they were given a stipend, they would be given money equivalent to each individual. Even if the child was young, they would be given money in accordance to that as well. So this welfare system, you know, which we become shocked when we look at the West. But in reality, the people who laid the foundation for these kinds of things was none other than the likes of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And there's numerous narrations like this where Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he would go out in the evening and he would see the situation which was happening amongst the people. And then accordingly, he would make legislation in the Khilafah to benefit the Muslims. One of the most famous narrations, which I will finish with today, and inshallah ta'ala tomorrow, if we get time, we will mention about these night patrols that Sayyidina Umar would do. One day, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he was walking in the streets of Madinah to Munawwarah. He could hear some children crying. There was a fire which was lit, a woman was cooking something, but these children, they were crying. He goes up to the mother, says, "What's going on?" And she says that, "In reality, we have no food. Kuch khane ke liye nahi hai." So he says, "What's in the pot?" She says, "Asal mein, I have taken some stones, I have placed it into the pot, so that these children, they think that I am cooking something, or intizar karte karte wo so jaye." And she mentions that about the Khalifa, that the Khalifa will have to answer for this. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he heard this, he became so upset. He went back to the Baytul Mal. He took out some flour. He took out some animal fat, ghee, and he began to place it all into one bag. His servant Aslam, he said, I'll carry it. It's so heavy. Amirul Mu'mineen, leave it, I will carry it. You know, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he said, Aslam, on the day of judgment, will you carry that burden as well? वो बोझ भी उठाएंगे क़यामत के दिन. He says, no, this is my responsibility. So he carries this sack. And he comes to the family. He lights a fire. He cooks the bread. After he has cooked the bread, he feeds the children. And then he says, no, this is not enough. The way that I have made them cry, I will make them laugh. So you know how people do, they play a game where they become a lion and they go onto all fours. Like this, he played with the children until they laughed and laughing and in a happy state. When they went to sleep, only at that point, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he says to the woman that I am the leader of the believers, come tomorrow from the Baytul Mal, inshallah, I will fix a stipend for you so that inshallah ta'ala, after this you will never be in need. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he used to say that I will give the widows so much, I will give the orphans so much, that after me they will not need anybody else. This was his justice. This is how he spent the wealth of the Muslims. Not in building cinemas, not in building football stadiums, not in having celebrities come and have music festivals, none of these kinds of things, my dear brothers. He spent the wealth of the Muslims upon the Muslims. And for this reason, even today, we remember him, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and inshallah, we will continue. Tomorrow we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May He forgive us for our major and minor sins. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to follow in the footsteps of the Khilafah ar-Rashidun. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in this life and in the hereafter. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een bi rahmatihi.